Good morning. Welcome to Solidarity Live. It is another Friday where we're going to be fighting to have nice things, maybe a little bit of healthcare as a treat. And we have a few mercenary Democrats who are fighting against that and trying to water things down. When they can't defeat, they try to destroy. And I am really pleased to be joined by my great friend, Dr. Sanjeev Sriram, aka Dr. America, to talk about healthcare. One of the most insidious ways that the mercenary Dems try to destroy programs called means testing, and what that actually does and how it impacts people. And then I think we'll just riff on our predictions of how things are going to land. Today is another deadline day that they have set for themselves. So it's supposed to happen today. Sanjeev, how are you?
I'm good, man. Supposed to happen today. Supposed.
Yeah, many weeks it's been going on this way. It's actually driven me a little bit mad. It's like, oh, and the thing that's super maddening is if you're working here in DC, working on it, like there's all this drama in the media, but like if you talk to people, it hasn't moved much. It actually has,
Right.
it's not moved. It's actually like it's at an impasse, and all the stuff in the press are just trying to work up leverage for advantage in the negotiations. But over the past 3 days, there has been movement on the Hill that matches some of what's in the press. Not all of it, but let me just do a little bit of what negotiating looks like, and then I want you to chime in to talk about it. Manchin will say, you'll get nothing. I'm going to take away climate. I'm going to take away Medicare. I'm going to take away all the pieces. I can't remember which other ones, but the point is there's only one of those that he actually is super focused on is climate. And the other ones, he's like, I will kill these too. And, in fact, he says, I'll kill the whole thing if you don't give me my climate one, because he's a coal baron. So he cares about being able to continue to burn the world in order to blow mountain tops off in order to enrich himself and his family. And cinema is like, oh, prescription drugs and corporate taxes and taxes on the ludicrously wealthy are my thing. You can't do any of those. And, they dress it all up as like, oh, well, I'm just being concerned about inflation. Let's bring the top line down and makes them sound smart and whatnot. But it's all actually just crooked. It's just them protecting either their current fortunes or in Cinema's case, she sees an angle where she wants to join the Davos set, which is a joke. She doesn't realize she's a patsy. She'll never be allowed into that world. And it would be almost comical watching it if it wasn't done on the backs of all of us.
Right.
So all of that happens, and then what comes out of it is bad. And we're hearing housing is gone. We're hearing community college is gone. And both of those were ones that actually were very much at risk. I've said on the show, community college it was sort of new. We'd heard housing, and then paid family leave was at risk. But the difficulty, it's all about power. So it's like, who is advocating for what is who can flex against these moderates. It's not like Joe Manchin cares about killing community college. He just has to kill something in order to, continue the charade that it's not just about the one thing. And he has to have like this character that he meets. And that's where means testing comes into it, because he just is like, oh, well, I don't want to give away too much money. So we're going to work requirements, and we're talking means testing. So work requirements are just inherently racist. Like they have an overtly racist past on purpose, means testing is the same exact genre. It's just actually like done by the more polite side. So they don't openly have, racism and discrimination built in there on the front of it. It's just on the back end that's how it ends up. So can you talk about that? Because Manchin is like, he's saying he would put this stuff on all of the policies, right? Like no universal policies. Everything should be means tested.
Right. I mean, like, and you're absolutely right. Like, means testing is basically, you have to be able to hear the remix of the racism, right? Like, if you knew what the racism sounded like, you'll hear it in the beat of means testing. And the reason why, like, it is as racist as it is because when you look at what is it that you're actually asking people to prove, right? You're asking them to prove, an answer to the question, are you worthy of fill in the blank? Are you worthy of healthcare? Are you worthy of support for your education? Are you worthy of getting help with your teeth? And the answer to all of those things is that, yes, by virtue of being human, you are worthy of these things. But according to the Manchins of the world, well, we want to make sure that undeserving people don't slip into this. So you have to prove that you actually need our help. Whereas, like, and the answer to the matter is, like, all of us need help with this. All of us need help getting our teeth fixed. All of us need help getting our kids educated. All of us need help with healthcare and with prescription drugs. So and for someone who is claiming that he's doing this out of fiscal conservatism, that like he wants to be fiscally responsible, the dumbest thing you can do from a fiscal responsibility standpoint is to put all of this like bureaucratic obstacle course. Like, I'm going to create an entire bureaucracy to just stop people from getting the help that they need. It's the dumbest waste of money, because all of that money should be going into helping people, not trying to figure out their worthiness and how much help they should get and for how long they should get it. I mean, as a pediatrician, I've seen the crappy end of means testing where pre-pandemic, 2/3 of America's uninsured were kids who were eligible but not enrolled, which means that they failed one piece of bureaucracy and they had failed another piece of bureaucracy, right? That like eligible meant that like, well, we kind of identified that you probably were worthy, but you were not enrolled because you had not gone through, or your parents had not gone through this obstacle course to get you connected to the help that you need. And that is what means testing is going to do again and again and again for people who need help. There are going to be so many people who are eligible to get, community college help. There are going to be people who are eligible to get health care, eligible to get dental care, eligible to get housing, but they're going to be unhoused, uncared for, uneducated because they didn't make it through the Manchin obstacle course to prove their worthiness, which it's just a level of cruelty that you don't have to be a pediatrician to see this. You don't have to be a doctor to get it, but from a policy standpoint, it's a stupid waste of money. From a human standpoint, it's just patently cruel and racist, and I just can't at this point of the pandemic. I really just can't with this level of cruelty anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that the the austerity fetishists who are just like always in this town, they have so much access. They mark their policies on two fronts. They have to be both cruel and stupid. So it has to hurt people, and it has to not accomplish what it says it's going to accomplish. Which is like save money or fiscal restraint or something. I will say there is one way that they do actually save money, right? So, but in that case, the cruelty is so high that I feel like offsets because they talk about doing things like putting a work requirement on something like, a dental benefit in Medicare, right? And you're like, okay, well, that setup guarantees that nobody gets the benefit.
Right.
And CBO will, the worst denizens of this swamp here in DC, because they're these absolute unelected, they never should have as much power as they do. It's like the parliamentarian, right? They've just grown to be this obstacle. The CBO says, this is the score. This is how much it's going to save. This is how much it's going to cost. It's always in a 10-year budget. All of those are why legislation it becomes so like dumb, missing pieces and all sorts. And you're like, that's CBO's fault. But CBO loves this stuff, so they'll score that as like, oh yeah, that costs nothing. That's a great policy, and you're like, it costs nothing because no one's going to take the benefits, and they're like, yes, exactly. That's why it's a great policy. Their whole world view is that spending money is actually like bad when it goes to the people, because you never hear this stuff when it comes to the military budget, right? The latest thing is, I hate negotiating around the top line, but just it is what a lot of people hear, is it 6 and then 3.5. Now it might come down to 2, and Manchin's like, that's so much money. Every year, if you use the same time horizon that we do in this one, it's $7.5 trillion on the military every single year. So it's like, it's just all lies. And again, I on this show, I try to get down to like, and I can be wrong, like, I can't see into his heart, but I'm here. I can tell you pretty clearly that he doesn't give anything about the things that he's saying. It's just the coal baron stuff, right? So that's where he's making his bones. Cinema is more of a cipher, and it does worry me every once in a while that I'm going to lose on pharma, like the thing I moved here for, got my master's, the thing that like everybody in the country is like, yeah, those guys are terrible. The government should definitely eat. Republicans are like, I have a poll that shows that libertarians support publicly manufacturing pharmaceuticals, right? Like that's how bad pharma is. And also how asinine so-called libertarians, self-identified libertarians are. But that's what we're up against right now, is like these people can come to Washington, D.C. to just work for the rich and powerful. And, it gets depressing and frustrating from where I am, because it's like, what can we do? What can we do? But we do know what we can do. We raise pressure. We raise our voices. And although they pretend they're immune to it, did you see how mad Joe Manchin got when Bernie Sanders wrote that op-ed in West Virginia? Like, and I mean, go ahead.
I honestly, I don't think Kirsten Sinema understands that, like, she is still the intern at the winery, right? Like, I mean, it's like, I don't think that she understands that, like, listen, you are not part of this club. You are still very much their intern. You are not, I mean, like, you may have, like, drank the same champagne and all of that, but they do not look at you and think, like, oh, she's one of us. No, they look at you and think, like, oh, good, we've got this one on the hook. She is, like, our drone. She is doing our dirty for us. Like, and it's just so sad and pathetic that, that she has to be harangued in the bathroom of, like, an Arizona college, like at the airport she's being confronted, and that it is as simple as, what, I'm going to actually turn around and listen to, like, what people want to hear and, like, what they want to say. Like, I mean, it's really as simple as that, right? Like, if you wanted me to, like, have any faith that you were doing the people's work in Congress, just turn around and be like, I'm going to put the phone down. Tell me what your question is, and I will give you a straight answer to it. Schedule a town hall meeting. Like, show me that you are actually doing this work. If you want me to, like, have, like, give you any kind of sense of benefit of the doubt. But right now, you're the winery intern that is, like, running around, like, trying to figure out the next order of champagne for a bunch of people who you will never be one of them. And you're doing so much of their dirty, when, like, you don't have to. Like, you could really be the people's champion here. I mean, I keep coming back to, like, to that confrontation that Adi Barkan had with Jeff Flake in that airplane, that you can be a hero right now. Like, I mean, like, that, like, is, that moment relives with me, because I'm like, that is something that, like, I wish every member of Congress could understand, that you have the opportunity to really show up for people every single time you are like, going to work in the people's house. And it's like the fact that you would rather be the winery intern instead is just sad and pathetic. And I'm so glad that the pressure is up, because honestly, I have so much more faith in that pressure than I do in people like Cinema.
Yeah, and I will say that what's happening in Arizona right now, we're part of it because drug prices. She's pretending to make her bones on it, unless she does make her bones on it, and then, oh man, it'll be sad. But yeah, like here's what I think is happening, and I've said it again, but just so people can get it right. So like she is going to she wants to protect the super wealthy because she's the wine intern, but she wants to have a tape. She wants to be invited and fly on private jets, not first class. That's my read on her, right? Like that she doesn't want to fly first class. She wants to fly on private jets. But in order to like make that happen, what she's done is she's like, oh, I also care about I don't want lower prescription drug prices. And everyone's like, what? Because Arizona's like, are you kidding me? Do you know the state? Like, look around, right? And so now everyone's like, oh my God, she's gonna, like kill pharmaceutical reform. Oh, and so now that's really taking up a lot. And then when a deal is struck, she'll win on the super rich taxes, which is what she really wants, and that'll be terrible, right? But she's gonna give on the prescription drugs, and so the headlines are going to be about Cinema gives on prescription drugs. Prescription drugs gets a green light, right?
Yeah.
And the dirty that she did for the ultra rich actually goes a little less undetected, or a little more undetected, I mean, so that she doesn't come out of it as a complete heel, right? Like, and the thing about, I oftentimes think of, and Brad always corrects me, I never know how to say the word in professional wrestling, that the acting that happens in professional wrestling, because that's actually, I think a lot of that stuff is how politicians are, like the Republicans who are like, you're like, how can they be so evil? And you're like, well, have you ever seen a heel in wrestling? You ever seen the guy who walks in and gets booed and is like, they're the heels. They're playing the heels. But it actually won't super work for Cinema's career if she comes out as a complete heel. So she's got to try to like figure out a way.
I mean, and at the end of the day, she still has that infrastructure bill that she can turn around and tell these real estate firms and chambers of commerce, like, hey, I brought you, like, all of your money, like, I mean, yeah, prescription drugs, I caved, and I mean, the people are going to get their cheaper insulin, but here you go, real estate baron, like, you can, build this bridge, and here you go, chambers of commerce, like, this, I mean, this highway project is all yours. Like, I mean, this is like big money for these real estate firms and these chambers of commerce, and
also
she's
remember
done
that
them a solid.
In that, what you just described, pharma is throwing money at her right now, right? So like all the industries are throwing money when somebody's saying I'm a roadblock on it. So then right at the end, you see who she was really flacking for the entire time, and pharma's like, oh man, I thought we had you, and pharma has so much money that you never like pharma is so rich that they're like, oh, do you want to be Davos rich? Like, we can do that, but generally like they can't, they can, like Billy Tozen, who was the originator of Medicare not being able to negotiate drug prices, he took a $2 million a year job, which is like so corrupt, it's outrageous. But also, that's not Davos money. Like, you don't get invited to Davos for that money. And I think what Kirsten Sinema is going after is like billionaire set. She wants to be in that world. So I don't know. That's my guess of where things are, and how dumb is our system that this is how things are being done.
I mean, like the lack of like, I mean, I see it from, like wanting the best for my patients, right? Like I don't want to see my patients' grandparents struggling in the parking lot of CVS, figuring out like, am I gonna, I mean, get my kids, Christmas gifts? Am I gonna get like, my grandkids like, a special treat for, the weekend? Or am I going to, fill this prescription? Or are we gonna knock out these utility bills? Like, by taking care of prescription drugs, like you are eliminating a huge amount of false choice for, I mean, millions of families across this country. And like that is the center of policy for me at all times is, the families that I'm seeing day in, day out. There is that other, the other piece of all of this is the political strategy of like, how do you not recognize that if you do not turn around and deliver material goods by November 2022, if you don't give people an experience of after years, I finally got my teeth checked out. After years, I finally got, glasses that I could afford that work exactly the way I need them to, like that I got this hearing aid. Like people need material, substantive benefits that that they can remember and that they can attach to like a positive experience that when they have to vote November 2022, they're going to remember the people who like, had their back. And I'm like, that is such basic political strategy. It's just like the most fundamental strategy that you have to execute in, I mean, in a pandemic world. And the fact that we're dropping the ball, to me, I'm like, is Trump really the dumbest one of all of us? Like, I mean, like, it really does make me question, like, like, are we as smart as we said we were when we were, I mean, campaigning last year?
Yeah, the political consequences of not doing anything or doing so little that it doesn't count,
Right.
right? So I'm fine, and we don't have to like go super wonky on this, but we can. There's a new idea in DC. It's worthy of interrogation, which is okay, we're not going to authorize, which means pay for these programs permanently. All these things that we want to do that are new spending, we're not going to authorize them permanently because of CBO. That would say it costs this much. But what we're going to do is we're going to pay for them for a short amount of time, and then they have to be reauthorized at the end of that. Now, just so everyone can follow along, that's what I was talking about with the military, right? So that is reauthorized every single year, $7.5 trillion every year. Progressives vote for it. Republicans vote for it. Everybody votes for it. It's like that's what happens because they're like, I'm not going to vote against reauthorizing the military budget. Like I'll get hammered for that.
Right.
And it's new, but a sort of new idea amongst Democrats, and I think some of the left as well, is okay, well, let's first of all, because of the filibuster, we only get to do stuff every decade. The last time we did stuff, and we were there, was I was young the last time we did stuff, right? Like when we got Obama.
I didn't need these reading glasses.
12 years ago. And now we're at another juncture where we can do stuff. And I'm middle-aged with 2 children, and that's how much time has passed. So because of the filibuster, we only get one chance. So let's do a lot of things, but not make them permanent. So the CBO says that it doesn't cost as much. And think about how, like that doesn't make any sense. You're like, correct. The CBO makes no sense. We should just eliminate the CBO. I can't remember. There's some hardcore right-wing Republican who says that. And I'm like, I agree. It's like Coburn or something. I'm like, me and you are on the same page, sir. But I can return to CBO with some stories that people should know, but it's a little too inside baseball on it. The idea is that let's force Republicans, because the media always tell these stories like right now. It's Democrats' fault if we don't get community college. It's like that's Democrats' fault. And you're like, two Republicans, any two could come and vote for it, and we would have community college. So why isn't it all Republicans
Yeah.
oppose community college. And the only time you do get that reporting is when they vote against funding it in a reauthorization fight. So the idea is, let's see if they will kill these programs. And it's a gamble for sure. It's a gamble. But the alternative is that you get to do like one thing every decade until we get rid of the filibuster. So I am hoping that our negotiators, the progressives, and Pramila and Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and many others, I think Pramila is doing such an amazing job with this block, right? That's an absolute new chapter in progressive power. The CPC effectively using power. It's amazing. If you go back to when Sanjeev and I were young and the last time we did things, the CPC was not an effective force at all. And we got rolled hard. They openly lied to us. And we're like, oh, we're definitely going to do the public option. We are with you. And they dealt it away on day 2 and just didn't tell us. So I'm hoping that the progressives in there are negotiating as hard as possible against means testing. There should be no work requirements, because work requirements are like just anathema. They're like the worst type of means testing. It's just they're also stupid, but it's like the cruelty side leads. And then in means testing, I hope they put it in places that make no sense at all. Right? Like, means test the highway. I don't know how you do that, but it's great. Like, the highway funding is means tested. And then everything else, they do the shorter time frames. And it's a dynamic system, so nothing's ever done. And I've made peace with that a long time ago. So like the struggle continues no matter what. And so I'm into it. Like, I don't know if you have opinions on that angle of it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, la lucha siempre, right? I mean, like that's always like, I mean, with us. And what I really want is for my patients and families to like start experiencing material benefit now. That like, I remember seeing like a story recently about HBCU grads getting, a lot of their debts like canceled. And just like, it's a small number of like students and grads, but just watching their stories on PBS NewsHour and realizing that, like, the relief on their face was saying more than any words coming out of their mouth. And I strongly believe that we, need this now more than ever. I mean, kids coming out of the pandemic, they've gone through almost 2 years of their education with nothing. Like, Zoom school has failed kids, and giving them a chance to do a do-over, or a bounce back with free community college is just, it's what we owe these kids and their families. Like, it's a shot at recovering some education or augmenting it, whatever they could get from Zoom school. Like, we owe them free community college just to get like that leg up. It's not even that they're going to necessarily be guaranteed anything, which is the dumbest thing about like means testing, is that like, it's not that you're like guaranteeing that these kids will become the next like Bransons or Bezoses or Musks. Like, they're going to get a shot at like, a good fight. Like, that is all. And and in that fight, they could still get their teeth knocked out, but like, it's a good fight for them. And so many of these families are not afraid of that fight. They want the chance to throw good punches, and they know how to roll with them too. And that is like the kind of material stuff that I want to see for the kids that I take care of, the families that I've been like watching struggle through all of this. And I just want them to believe again that like that people have got their back, that they don't live in a society that like calls them heroes for doing the work that is considered essential, but then treats them like they're expendable again and again and again. I mean, the fact that like we're debating paid family leave, I'm like, it's a pandemic. Do you realize that this pandemic got to as bad as it was because we did not have a leave policy that any sick worker could rely upon to go take care of themselves when they were like suspecting, is this COVID? Is it bad cold? Is it allergies? I don't know. They should have been able to stay their asses at home.
And that one, I feel there is, and I won't. The Fox News are the worst. That's stipulated. But that what you just talked about, there's this elite liberal take that you see on TV all the time. Although I don't watch it, but I get it. Where the working class is blamed, like, oh, well, it's this personal responsibility, and workers are, we know epidemiologically that how COVID works. It spreads in the workplace and it spreads at home. And then it's because, it's people get sick in the workplace, they bring it home, and they get people sick in home, and then they go out and get sick in the workplace. That's it. Everything else, you can always get hit by a bus when you walk down the street, but like that's kind of an outside probability. We know that that's the way that infection is occurring, and so that's a policy solution. You don't then,
right.
if you feel sick, stay home. You see those notices in places, and you're like,
Right.
well, can they?
Right.
Can they stay home? Is it possible for the workers to stay home? And in the working class, if you lose a shift or you're seen as not dependable, then you're gonna get someone else is gonna eat your lunch.
Yeah.
And that is so annoying that like this obvious policy, and it's touted sort of as a like feel good thing. And we were talking before, I steal your words on this all the time. I love your take on it because it's true. Like the feel good stuff is good. I want that. I want all the feel good stuff, but like,
right.
in addition to the feel good stuff of paid family leave is like the absolute critical health and public health consequences of this policy. And to think that we might not get it at all in the middle of a pandemic, it's just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. And it's also that like the racial justice element of paid family leave needs a minute, right? Like, so when you looked at spring 2020 and looked at like, who is able to stay at home in terms of work and who cannot, 4 out of 5, workers of color worked outside of home. 4 out of 5. And so that meant that like those 4 out of 5 workers were already had a big target on their back when it came to COVID, because they had no other choice but to leave their house and to make that dollar. And there was no family leave to protect them from doing otherwise. Then you get to their workplace and it's like the boss doesn't have any clarity about, do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? And even now, bosses are still not making workplaces safe places for people to work without worrying about getting infected. And it doesn't matter, even now, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about like, are they vaccinated or are they unvaccinated? If your workplace is a dangerous place to work, like the vaccine can only do so much. Like this, like, and we know this because in previous flu seasons, people get sick with flu, like you were pointing out, at work. And so you have a boss that doesn't protect you when you're, on the job. You cannot afford to, gamble with any of this, because like that meager wage is like what your family is counting on you for. Then you get sick. Now it's a question of like, okay, am I sick enough where I can go to the doctor? Because this is also a financial decision, right? Like, do I really want to put the copay down? Do I really want to, like, am I going to get the kind of good quality care, that I need? Or am I going to get stuck with like whatever, at a minute clinic? Or should I just tough it out and like, and just, skip it, go to work? Because after all, that's financially responsible, is to not go to the doctor. Like, these are all of the obstacles that have put people of color, like in direct confrontation with COVID. It is why COVID has killed Black and Latinx people at 2 to 3 times the rate that it's killed white people. And like you were pointing out before, policy fixes a lot of these things. When you have paid family leave, people are able to stay home and and figure out, was this a cold? Was this COVID? When you've got access to meaningful care, not just made it more affordable, but actually get people through the door to see the doctor, without means testing them to figure out, like, oh, should you really be on Medicaid this long, which is a ridiculous question. Like, take policy and look at all of these obstacles that, like, made it harder, for people to get the things that they needed, and made it easier for COVID to kill people, and do the policy thing. Like,
and reverse
the
it,
paid, and
right?
reverse it.
Reverse it.
I mean,
Make it
just say that,
harder for
we're never
COVID
going
to
to do
kill
this
people.
again. I keep coming back to, like, we're in October, 2021. October of 1929, like, it felt like after Hoover screwed people and just ignored them for a long time, you had FDR listening to the masses. It's not that FDR had a benevolent heart. FDR listened to organizers and masses of people moving and said, you know what, we should have an FDIC. We should have Social Security. Because after all, like, we should have learned our lesson from all of this. Like, the fact that there was a willingness to use policy, build programs, and learn that, like, we should not do this again. That is the level of policy that we need right now. We need FDR policy, but I really worry about for my patients and families is that all they're getting is effed. All they're getting is effed when they deserve FDR.
Yep. I think that is a valid worry. And I'm laughing, but it's just because what else are you going to do? It's like sad. This is my humble brag, but man, was it awesome. So maybe not that humble, but I was speaking on an event with Bernie Sanders, and Reverend Barber was on it, which I was like, man, that is awesome.
Awesome. Dude, you crushed it on that event. Love that event.
Well, thank you. And I name checked you and stole some of your words. So
that's also why it was awesome.
The Reverend Barber on there was talking about it, and I know this, but like we have already passed enormous spending bills in the midst of the pandemic, right? And so like we should be looking at the totality of what we've done, because like we bailed out the big corporations like that. I mean, we gave trillions of dollars. Now we did do some amazing things for workers as well. Right, the UI plus up was just this Ron Wyden left hook out of. No one saw that one coming, even not no one, but very few people. Even when it was like everyone's like, oh yeah, but we lost on this other stuff, and then all of a sudden, our quantitative wonks are like, does anyone know how awesome this is? And then, and actually, poverty went down during the pandemic because of cash benefits, because of direct. That's the good stuff. Like that, we know that works. And I'm not, but we gave trillions of dollars to corporations. Like we bailed them out so hard, so fast, and so permanently. And oftentimes they turned around and screwed the workers too, right? Like we gave money to businesses, and they went on to hire to crack down on their workplaces, and so. It's not like this is the only thing that we've done. We're talking about like some parity between the billionaire handouts that have already gone out the door and real support for the American people. And I just think like in that light, we really should, we should, I mean, I'm going to say we should be talking about 6 trillion, right? Like that's the actual numbers that we should be talking about. So in sort of there's a lot of little pieces that are still floating around. And I want to just delve back into means testing, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
So, SSI, Supplemental Security Income, it's actually a cash assistance program primarily for, it's not actually part of Social Security itself, the insurance product, but it's administered by the Social Security Administration, because what we know is that Social Security benefits are too low. There's all sorts of structural inequities that lead to people with disabilities and seniors, especially the oldest of the old, being extremely poor, right? Like survivability is in question without a small amount of cash assistance. And SSI is so tiny. Like it's, I first encountered the program when I was a health educator in HIV clinics, and I had some homeless clients that were very complex cases, and SSI was actually like could have a roof over their head for a small amount of time in a temporary situation, but in that place, could actually start maybe seeing the health educator or a provider or whatever it is to get some of the other stuff that they're dealing with, like an HIV infection or mental health issues, SSI it was literally, it saved people's lives. I watched it, and it's such a tiny amount of money. So we have a shot in reconciliation and actually getting SSI in, and it's so small that I don't think like Manchin's even noticed it yet or something. And what we're actually talking about doing there is reversing some of the means testing that was literally put into this program. Our great friend Rebecca Vallis has a very wonky term for it, but it's totally true. It's bureaucratic disentitlement. There's this right-wing Kafka-esque way where they put in these things like making it literally impossible. So this program serves the most vulnerable populations by the nature of the program. And so like to make the process so complex that you need, as I said, a health educator. My job in doing that was often, I was the paperwork person.
Yeah.
Like I actually had to do the paperwork to try to get, all of the different programs that it would take to provide a client or a patient, from your perspective. I worked with the medical team, and think about that. That's so dumb. That's so these are supposed to be aimed at keeping people out of extreme poverty. So you have to be able to access it. And that philosophical fight, we're winning on the Hill, right? So it's like people recognize it after it happens, and they're like, I can't even believe how it got this bad. And you're like, you're doing it with the other hand. That's how it got this bad. Because it just takes 40 years of the right wing just hammering away, and then sort of a liberal acquiescence at times, like, oh, well, it could be worse. And you're like, don't fight for less bad, fight for good. And that's why, at Social Security Works, what I'm always proud of all of our work. But I'm super proud of our just really aggressive universality, our aggressive push for the philosophical and policy benefits of universality. It's like, oh, well, somebody who might not need it is going to get that benefit, and looking right at them and being like, who cares? Who cares? It is a teeny amount. You want to talk about like mistargeted stuff? Look in the corporate sector about, like, let's means test corporate welfare out the wazoo. I'd means test the heck out of that. But when it comes to helping people, you should just universalize the benefits, because you don't then need a bureaucracy. You don't need the we didn't really get into it too much, but we have time. Like it's a devastating process to have the government in there in your life with a like looking in your shopping cart. With SSI, if a family member or somebody gives you food, you have to report that to the government. And if you don't, you could lose your benefits. Now, remind yourself, this is like the most vulnerable population. What are they going to do? Like pull out their laptop and be like, oh, yeah, I was going to starve to death, and then someone gave me food. So government, like that is the worst. That's big government. When the bureaucracy is aimed at the people to hold them down, that's the bad big government. That's means test corporate welfare. That's my new thing.
I mean, and for people who have a hard time imagining, what would it look like to have a program with zero means testing? I asked them, like, when was the last time you went to the public library? Even better, go to a public library with children, and you will understand what a miracle it is to have a public service, like provide for you and your family without ever questioning What do you earn? Can I see a pay stub? How much do you have? Like, can I see a bank statement? What do you mean you got this much, like, I mean, a bonus last year? Like, none of those questions, right? Like, you just go to the library, you apply for a library card, you know, and you have access to, I mean, everything that that library has to offer. And maybe you need a lot of help. Maybe you're a teenager that needs like homework assistance. Maybe, you're a senior who needs access to the internet. Or maybe you're like my daughter, where it's like you have a real love of Elephant and Piggy books and you just can't get enough and you just want to read the next one. And that is all you really wanted the library to do, was hook you up with your fix. You get your, Gerald and Piggy going and you're done, right? But it's like everybody gets what they need when they show up without being asked all of these invasive questions about, are you struggling? How much are you really struggling? Doesn't sound like you're struggling that much. Like, none of that scrutiny. It's just come and enjoy the benefit of education and learning and, and service. And I think that is possible in so many different sectors. Like, we can do that in healthcare. We can do that in SSI. We can do that in housing. But it's just got to require that we don't give a damn if somebody who appears undeserving might be getting a little bit of help that, doesn't feel right. Like, that is a stupid feeling. Just like, it is, and it's as easy as not caring that the person gets the help that they need. And I honestly feel that we are so close to it. Most of us are actually capable of this, but it just requires that, like, we not let that little doubt turn into a bigger thing than it really needs to be.
Yeah,
We don't need to scrutinize each other.
When they say, oh, well, what about a billionaire's child going to community college? Would you want that paid for? And I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
A,
Yes.
Billionaires don't send their children to community college. But B, if they did, that child would be remarkably more well-adjusted
Right.
than in the billionaire circuit. So, like, yes. And if all of the billionaires, literally, like, let's just say the global plutocratic elite, if all of them sent their children to community college, there's 1,200 of them. It's a very small amount. So, like,
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah.
And no one knows anyone's circumstances either. So the whole idea is wrong. And so it's like, oh, well, tell me a program. And you're like, Social Security. How about Social Security? You earn it and then you become insured. So it's a social insurance. Once you've earned, right, and we have requirements on it, and you've earned this by paying in. It's our money. But once you are fully insured, that's it. It is yours. And no questions. You never have to show anything, and it's yours forever, right? That's the power of it. And that's what makes it so remarkably powerful. The nation's largest children's program. Why? Because it has survivor's benefits. And if a person qualifies for the insurance and then they die, well, a portion of their wages are replaced for their surviving children. I mean, like, we know, and who loves Social Security? Everyone. Right. Everyone loves Social Security. So we know that the universality is a key thing. It builds buy-in. It actually brings people together. No one is looking over anyone else's shoulder at the Social Security check and being like, did they deserve? Like, it just doesn't, right? But you take a program like WIC or something like that, which used to be food stamps. This is a cash assistance program that helps people with food, women and infant children, like, think of all of the things on the internet of people like looking into other people's grocery carts and being like, oh, dude, it would be way better if all those programs were as cash-like as possible, right? Like, you just got a debit card that looked identical to all other debit cards that you could spend on whatever you wanted, actually. Right. And this is the elite liberals get this totally wrong because they're like, well, what if they spend it on cigarettes? And you're like, then they would have anyways, because you know what? People find a way, but the vast majority of people are not going to do that. They're actually going, if they went through the process to get the cash assistance, and this is all borne out by data, What happens is people use the assistance for a temporary amount of time that they need it. They needed it. And then when
Yeah.
they don't need it anymore, they stop.
Stop. Yeah.
That's what happens. There
Yeah.
is not a problem where you have
Yeah.
an enormous number of people doing the wrong thing. And in fact, I'll just tell this just so people have it. The more requirements that you put on something, the more bureaucratic, the bigger there is a black market, right? So people can't buy. I'm going to maybe get some of these wrong because it's been a while, but WIC you can't buy diapers with, right? Is that one
Correct.
of them, right? So but diapers are a critical thing for a new family, right? So if a family finds themselves in a position where they only have this cash-like thing that can't be used on diapers, but they need diapers, they find a way, and black markets actually emerge where you can pop your WIC card you lose part of the cash value and it goes to a gangster, somebody who has created a criminal black market, who then will buy. Like, why would we ever want to do that?
Yeah.
Now you're taking vulnerable families and putting them in a situation where they have to be close to a criminal element. Like, all of that can be eliminated by understanding the philosophy of universality. That the vast majority of people who use these programs need the programs, and when they don't need them anymore, they're going to stop. If that's the type of temporary cash assistance program it is. I don't know if you noticed, but I sort of came into. We can maybe close out on this one. There's a, and people might get a little mad at me for talking about it, but not too much. So the dental benefit in Medicare, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know that. It's the biggest deal. Of vision, hearing, and dental is by far and away the biggest deal. Because dental, rotting teeth kill you just quickly. Dr. America can tell you from the medical perspective. And it's big because the unmet need in this country is enormous. So getting this benefit going, and we at Social Security Works have been working with our champions on the Hill on the policy. And it's just true that HHS has said it's going to take 2 years to get it up and running. And that's not good enough, right? That is not a material benefit in people's pockets directly. And so there is a need for a bridge policy, something to go from now until the benefit starts. And I advocate for $1,000 in $100 bills that we actually just mail $1,000 to each person. That might be a little too extreme for some people, but the next best thing is a debit card that gives people the cash benefit, and it's a temporary cash benefit. It's a one-time bridge policy, not a voucher, because the dental benefits will come online and they will be covered then by Medicare going forward, and it will reform the entire dental industry. But in the meantime, in a one-time bridge way, I want to get cash into seniors' hands. And it worries me not at all, right? I would literally mail them cash. And it's like, well, what if they went out and had a nice dinner? And it's like, well, good for them then. But that's going to be rare because people have a need for vision, hearing, and dental right now. That's what they're going to spend the money on. What do you think about it?
No, I mean, I agree 100% that, I mean, when you look at just how poorly we have taken care of people's teeth and that we treat teeth like they are luxury items. And it's like, no, healthy teeth are not the same thing as having a garage full of Benzes and Teslas. Like, it's not the same thing at all. Like, you must have healthy teeth in order to have good nutrition, in order to prevent like infections, complications that will wreck your circulation. If you've got diabetes, if you've got bad teeth, those two are a deadly combo. People, and the thing is, like, patients have not gone to medical school. They know how bad it is to have unhealthy teeth. They will gladly take whatever assistance they can, even if it isn't to get their whole mouth taken care of, to get like at least a little bit of it done, or at least a little bit of it started. And for so many of us in healthcare, like, this is the thing that, like, I did not go to dental school. all I know is that that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. But I don't know how to fix this. Like, I don't have the tools, the training. But like, by knowing that like my patient can take, the assistance that they've been given to go and get this problem taken care of, like that is a level of, I mean, relief that I can encourage in them, that they probably don't even need my encouragement. They would just see like a happy doctor knowing that, like, hey, you're gonna go get your teeth fixed. Like, it's huge that. And I want to point out to people that we were able to do like huge things like this, with a whole lot less. When Medicare first came into existence, like the law was passed in 65, it got implemented in 66. Millions of seniors got enrolled in Medicare with no computer technology. The best technical stuff that you had available was the phone, the radio, you had good newspaper circulation, and the US Postal Service. That is how you got millions of seniors enrolled into Medicare in like record time. I have a hard time believing that we can't get people to the dentist's office with the money that they need to get the work done, and that we can't start like, making oral health like, part of health justice.
Absolutely. And I think I'll close this out. I'm looking at the time. Sanjeev, it's really fun to talk to you about all of this stuff. I do think that the one thing you left out on Medicare is just that we were also a poorer country, right? I mean, It's the same, like the believability factor of this stuff is low because you're like, well, we're way richer than we were in 35. And man, we had note cards then. My favorite story in closing about Social Security, which is awesome. And I forgot some of the characters, but you can still Google it. That somebody was actually like attacking Social Security to some of the founders of the New Deal, like the Francis Perkins set, and was like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to write everyone's work history down on a note card and keep a catalog of their wages throughout their working life and just have them all on note cards? And they were like, that's a great idea. We didn't know what we were going to do, but that's what we're going to do. And it was just a bunch of note cards, right? So like, we know that we can do this stuff, and we just have to overcome some of these craven and greedy politicians who are trying to make their bones on the things they care about. Political pressure works, and we need as much political pressure as we can right now. And Sanjeev, we can do all these things with solidarity by working together. We can beat the plutocrats, and we're not going to win because the struggle continues always. But we can materially benefit people's lives in a way that they haven't seen in decades. And that will make the fight going forward so much better. So thank you, Sanjeev, for joining us on Solidarity Live. Thanks to everyone at home, and we'll be back next week.